All right, today we have Katrina here on the YouTube channel, and she is the heart and soul behind Lindale Studios, which is a studio dedicated to helping brands find their colors. She also does a lot of education about color and color theory. And really cool, she does like hand painted pieces and styling mats for photos for like brand photo shoots and stuff. So, quickly, tell me a little bit about one, where you live, because I think it's super interesting, and how that like plays into you finding inspiration and for like color and art in your everyday life.
Okay, so hello, thank you for having me on here. I live in Japan currently with my husband and my three kids. We have been overseas for 4 years now. We've been in Japan for about 9 months. We moved from Spain. We're based out of the Washington, D.C. area. As far as how it helps with inspiration is I've learned to look at life in so many different ways. I don't think that there's one way to look at things. And I think I've been inspired by not only visual things around me, like in Europe, I was inspired by very beautiful buildings and flowers and travel and people and languages. And now I'm in a place where the buildings are not as inspirational, but the way of life is. It's very peaceful. I can find beauty in like having more time, having just like a calmer atmosphere around me rather than things being like go, 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 go. Um, People gather at places I've visited all throughout the world. Like people tend to gather more outside the home and just like they love being with each other and people and family is extremely important. So I don't know, things like that have come to inspire me over just visual inspiration. I get daily life inspiration as well.
Yeah, I love that. So you work with a lot of brands. And so
Mhm.
being overseas, how does that serve your branding clients? How do you feel like it impacts them?
I think since I moved out of the US, even though it's temporary, we get so much inspiration from our screens and our phones because not everybody can, afford to get on a plane and go travel to Europe or go, see the Eiffel Tower or go to Monet's Gardens or go to Iceland and get all this color inspiration. So because I did get to see that up front and up close, it was amazing. But I've also been able to see, okay, this is what triggers inspiration. This is what I can draw from what I'm like in my surroundings. And I can kind of help other brand owners do the same. One of my goals is just to teach people about inspiration in general and just like, okay, well, how can you get that from a walk with your kids? Or how can you get that from just like going to a fun coffee shop? Or how can you get inspiration from your story rather than it always having to be related to travel or like florals or just things that naturally come to mind because they are really beautiful or we've seen them on a screen and we really want to be like everybody else and do all these things, but that's not always practical. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. And what inspired you to focus on brand color analysis?
So I saw a need for really young brands or people or business owners, I should say, that are not, they haven't been educated as well in the areas of color and design, and they aren't ready to invest into like a full rebrand yet. I feel like there's a niche in there, right? Because it's a lot. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of money. It's just a huge investment all around. And I think that there were a lot of business owners that were like, okay, well, I'm really passionate about what I'm doing. I've figured out my wording. I'm taking the courses, but I don't have the confidence to get my messaging out. I don't know how to like show up on social media in an organized platform. My website looks different than my Instagram, like all these things, and it's just not tying together. And so
Right.
no one's really paying attention because they're getting mixed messages all around. Their potential clients are like, oh, well, she's saying one thing on a website and then they're saying something else on, you know, their Instagram. Like, I don't understand what's going on here. So I want to help with that. And one of the biggest ways I can help personally is with color, finding good brand colors, showing you how to be consistent in them. And yeah, so
Yeah.
that's where that came from.
Yeah, something I feel like I have trouble explaining to, especially my website and a day clients, is the importance of color because they kind of just think like, I just need a website. And I'm
Yeah,
like, ugh.
yeah,
So can you
yeah,
explain a little bit about like the importance of color and branding?
yeah. Um, so we read color and images 60,000 times faster than text. And I am a huge believer in the importance of copy and copywriting and all those things. Because I think a lot of times we just want to go the visuals because that's fun, right? Like the branding
Right.
photos and all that. But having consistent colors, it's something that is easy to put in your brand, easy to put in your brand consistently to get people to recognize you. Because, like, for instance, if you're a photographer, you're probably, I have personally seen that a lot of people rely only on their work and they are just like, oh, well, I want my work to be recognizable. I want my portfolio to be out there and people just be able to see that in my work. Well, if you're a wedding photographer and you're not in a place where you're booking like a lot of the same type of clients, your work is going to be recognizable maybe in style, but you're not in a place where it's all going to look like, oh, they hired you for your style. There's different colors in each wedding. There's, all these different things going on where your color that you can put in the background of something or put in your font or place on your website or put on your reel covers, like that is something that's very recognizable and easy, personal, and it's yours. And
Yeah.
I think that's just huge because today we're interacting in a world where, we don't own Instagram, we don't own Facebook, we don't own Pinterest. The only thing you really own is your website. And, you know, you can also own your colors. You can have confidence behind them. And when they're distributed in those areas, like no one can really take that away from you. So,
Yeah. Yeah, so true. So for the people who are trying to DIY their branding and their colors and just have no idea direction, what do you
yeah, yeah.
suggest they do to kind of figure out their colors?
It's such a funny question because I help, that's like mainly who I help right now with that. But a good place to start, and it's okay, so a lot of people talk about target market,
Mhm.
where your target market, your target audience, I should say. And I feel like maybe 10 years ago that was huge, and we still need to like look into that, obviously, for sure. However, I feel like that's, in my personal opinion, I feel like that's only like a third of it. So there's your target audience. So like see who are you wanting to buy your product from? What's their lifestyle? What's their daily life look like? And then what's your story? What made you start your business? How did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Like, what were the adversities you overcame? What were the exciting things about your life? What brought you to start your business? And then they're like, what sets you apart? What are the things that only you bring to the table? And that's where I like to play around with your story in that because that sets you apart. That makes you different. Because, like, for instance, a lot of people think, oh, classic equals navy blue. Well, if everybody's running a classic business and everybody has navy blue, no one's going to stand out, right? So, like, okay, well, what kind of blue? Could we change that blue to make it a little more modern or even a little bit more classy or like a little more moody, depending on your story and what sets you apart? So, those are the things that I would suggest to examine.
Yeah,
Does
yeah,
that make sense?
yeah. And we had a conversation kind of a little bit because I wanted to add purple into my branding. And you
Yes.
were like,
Yes.
okay, why? And I was like, I don't know. I really like the
My
lilac.
question.
Yeah, you're like, you
Yeah.
just dove in. You're like, did you
Yeah.
have a lilac bush growing up? And I was like, yes, I did actually, right
Yeah.
outside my house, and I love the smell of it. And so it's like when I was then like, okay, well, what kind of version of purple? I was able to go towards like, what did that bush outside my house that I grew up with for 18 years look like? And so that's
Yeah.
just something I never even have, even though I'm in this world and sometimes help people with color, I never thought about that way of doing things. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
You kind of talked about like ideal client. How important is it to conduct market research before finalizing your brand colors?
I do think it's a big deal. It is, like I said kind of before, in my personal opinion, it's just part of what you go into, right? Because again, we all have our target audiences, but they're all showing up in different platforms. They're showing up in different ways. Like if you have a audience that's showing primarily up on YouTube, that will be your colors may be slightly different than if you were showing up more in person or you were meeting people over Instagram or you just were on LinkedIn. Like those are going to be really different avenues you take when you choose your colors because if you look at the clientele on LinkedIn versus Instagram or YouTube, it's very different. It's not bad, it's just really different.
Yeah,
So
totally.
again, I think you want you do want to pay attention to it, but don't make it your only thing. It's just part of the puzzle.
Okay. And what tools or resources do you recommend for color selection?
So people may think this is weird. I paint all my swatches. When I'm doing the color analysis, like I'm sitting there and I do research and then I'm like coming up with the colors as I paint them. That's just how my brain works. But obviously not everyone is like that. So I would suggest you can play with Canva because it's like a free tool and
Yeah.
it's very self-explanatory. A lot of people are learning how to use Canva. I mean, you can play with Illustrator if you have Adobe products. That is a more expensive option. So I would definitely say Canva, or you can take, and this may be going the extra step, but you could also take a bunch of photos that maybe have inspired you through your business. Like, let's say your colors, one of your brand colors was green. You could take, a bunch of inspiration photos that you have and look at the photos down on the table and then say, oh, I like that green and
Mhm.
pull it into Canva and be like, okay, I like that green. Okay, now I have 10 greens. Why do I like this? And kind of just ask yourself questions. And I mean, there are artistic rules, I should say, that go behind why we do what we do. But yeah, in the end, it really is your choice and it's it's yours. So Canva is probably the best probably the best place for beginners if you just want to like fool around with swatches digitally. So
Okay. And if you're DIYing the color palette, how many colors do you think you should have in a palette?
So I would start with three. And then what I do is I would start with three colors. And then off of those three colors, you could do like one or two other options. So, like, have a darker and a lighter version of your brand color, or a more neutral version of your brand color and then a lighter color. Just so you have, like, oh, I put it on a website and I don't really like the way it looks there, but it's still related to that. So, like, let's say one of your colors was purple. So I have my purple swatch. And then below it, I'm going to have a light purple and then a more gray purple. So, okay, well, that area, it's just that purple looks a little intense right there. So I'm going to use that gray purple instead. So
Okay.
basically, I would start with.
Okay. Yeah. What are some common mistakes brands make when selecting their colors?
Okay, this is so funny because I just wrote about this the other day. Um, One is I think people only look at the target market
Mhm.
and they're like, okay, I'm a landscaping company, so I need to do that bright neon green. Everybody does that. Or I am I'm running a beauty business. I need it to be black. Or I'm running I don't know. There's just things that I feel like because of maybe it's because of how design has evolved over the last few years or how social media has changed everything, but everybody just thinks it automatically needs to be this one color. They're only looking at target market. Two, they choose a color palette meant for someone else. So I've heard stories from designers who are getting ready to fill like a template order. And so they'll say to the client, okay, what's your colors that you want? And they're like, oh, I want that. I want what you have on your example photo. That's what I want. They're like, okay, I can do that for you. That has nothing to do with you, but that's what you want. So there you go. Where the designer was most likely designing that for a specific reason for that fake client that they made. So, or people are choosing, oh, here's your top five templates, or sorry, top five color palettes to use. And okay, they may be beautiful, but sometimes I think in the beginning we tried to separate ourselves from our brand because we don't have the confidence to show up in it. So we're like, oh, I'm gonna pick something just because it's pretty and it's not me, but it's pretty and it'll sell. So that's what I'm gonna go with. And that only gets you so far. That was literally me.
Yeah.
Like it's just you're gonna be like, this is not me anymore, in 3 years or 5 years, whatever. Um, and three, they choose trends over colors that push through the hard times. So there are definitely trends. I don't know if when I started my business back in 2019, blush pink was really in.
Mhm.
And it was like blush pink, navy blue, and I think I had a green. Like I didn't even really have brand colors. This is crazy. And I just used the colors that came from my work because I was constantly pushing stuff out for other people. And then it got to a point where it's like everything I was pushing out because it was so tailored to each client, it wasn't, um, I was just pushing it for them. So it people weren't, I couldn't show up in my brand anyway because I didn't have anything. that visually said anything about myself. I did have really good brand photos, but I didn't have like solid brand colors. And I was tending to be like, oh, well, I work for wedding professionals. I need to be navy blue. That is what I need to do. And I started going that route. And then probably within the last year and the last 6 months, I started to redo my own brand colors, which I'm in love with now. But I was going before I came to my really solid brand colors, I was tending to choose trends. And that's what brought me to what I'm doing now. It's like it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It will get you to where you need to, like temporarily, but if you're building a business that lasts, it will not, it will only get you to a certain point. So again, sorry, one, they look at the target market only. Two, they choose a color palette meant for someone else. And three, they're choosing trends over like pushing through the hard phase of
Yeah.
business. Does
So
that
what
make
is
sense?
it? Yeah, what is your color palette now?
So I have a sunset red color, which I used to be terrified of red. I thought it was for stop signs, stop lights, and like warnings. Like, why would I ever want that in my brand? But yeah, long story. That's a story for another day.
Yeah.
Then I have this bluish, deep bluish dark green, and then like a sage green, and then a cream color.
Okay.
So yeah.
We'll have to talk more because I'll have to have you.
Yes,
I
yes.
want to hear what made you land on
Yeah,
red
yeah.
because
I
I
know,
bet it
it's
has something to
crazy.
do with you living in Spain or something like that.
It did. It did. That's kind of where it started because I started seeing how there were certain things in my life and certain photos I was laying all out, which I could talk about mood boards a whole other day. That's another conversation for another day. And I was like, why does this color keep showing up?
Mm,
And then I kept saying, why am I scared of it? And I was like, it's red's not beautiful and it doesn't fit in and it's not cool like everybody else. Well, that's crazy because now people are recognizing my brand colors and I show up way more confident. Like I'm like, oh yeah, this is me.
yeah.
Welcome, or feel free to leave. Like, don't feel like I'm not gonna have to do this because running a business takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy. It's you have to sacrifice in other ways. And I'm not willing to just like halfway do stuff anymore.
Yeah.
I'm in or so anyway,
Yeah. Okay, let's
sorry.
talk a little bit about texture because I feel like I know nothing about
Ooh.
this. Like, how does that fit into brand and is it necessary?
Is it 100% necessary for every brand? No, I do not think so. I don't think every client that ever come to me would be like, oh, I need this. I do think it humanizes your brand a little bit. Today, we scroll through Instagram a lot. We are seeing videos. We just live in such a digital world. As much as some of us don't like that, sometimes I'm like, oh, I just don't want to like, it's just reality as a business owner. I have to be on my phone. I have to be on my screen. It just is what it is. And you're looking at all these different brands and, everyone's trying to show up in all these different ways. And because it's so easy to change your brand color, you can go on Canva and just change the swatch. You can just go on your website and drag the little notch over a little bit to make it lighter or darker, or change the tone or the shade. It's just still really flat. It's
Mm,
showing up as a flat color. So, like one of the things I do for my brand packages is I will paint styling mats and backdrops that are the exact shade and tone of your brand color so that when you lay it out, you can photograph it and then use it on backgrounds for like all the social media things or backgrounds on your website because it just creates another layer of dimension. And it's funny because I just did a brand color analysis and one of the clients had said, so on the first page, I take a picture of like all the little swatches I use. So you can kind of see this just looks pretty and it gets you like excited. And she goes, "Oh, I like that. I like that swatch right there. That's the color." And I said, "Oh, well, that's a hand painted swatch that I pulled one of the colors from." And she was like, "Oh, because people are drawn to texture and something different." And it's just another way to like up level. So you can
yeah.
have your colors, but then just have create texture in your brand
Hmm.
that's outside of your photos because you can only do so much with a picture. So it's just another way to uh, differentiate yourself and
Yeah.
humanize your brand. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And as a
Okay.
website designer, the first,
Yeah.
uh, you go into like copying with branding. The same thing happens with website. When you're trying to DIY your website, you look at who you admire. And back in
Yeah.
2018, when I started my business, I
Mhm.
still am a big Ashlyn Carter fan. And her hero image was a flat lay, and it was a
Gorgeous.
beautiful flat
Yeah.
lay, but it also had a really beautiful textured background, right? And I was like, I need that. Like, but I can't, that's not something I can just copy. right? Like I can copy a lot of
You
aspects of
can
a website.
try.
Well, I could try, but like that's something that really
Yeah,
it's a way
yeah,
to stand out. It is. Like I could copy her colors if I wanted to. I don't. Mine are very
yeah.
different.
No, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I could, but you can't copy that image that's taken. And you
Mhm.
obviously can't copy images of
Yeah,
them that are them, but it is something that
yeah,
really makes you stand out and really up levels a website or even like background images on a website. Like you have the text in front and you kind of have the
yes,
transparent background. A lot of people will just do a photo and that's fine, or stock
right.
photo. But if you have it branded, it really does up level a website. So just something to keep
Yeah,
in the back of your head. Maybe you can't,
yeah,
if you're watching this, like you
yeah,
can't pay for that right now, but like eventually it really can up level a website for sure.
yeah.
So
And
let's,
there,
oh,
I
sorry.
was just gonna say there's like stages in business, right? So even just getting solid brand colors is so helpful
It is.
because I think sometimes we tend to invest in things that we're like, oh, that's going to change. That's going to change it. Like if I just do that. And, but we haven't taken the time to like show up consistently and do the little things that we need to do. And, or we've just done parts like, okay, I figured out my copy. Okay, great. I got my brand photos. Great. I got my messaging. Great. Now I'm going to show up visually. But then I need to take that other part, consistency, and that requires confidence. So
Right.
that's where I think your brand colors really do help with that. And then down the road, obviously, if you ever want me to paint anything, happy to do it. Love it. It brings me a lot of joy. But yeah, just it's not for everybody right now, right away. So
Right.
that's what I'm trying.
And when I think about like as a new business owner, when you have all these things to invest in, um, if you can have somebody that's uncovering or you uncover your brand and spend a lot of time on your branding colors, those colors can last you the entirety of your business. And that is one of the only things. Most likely your copy will change because usually most businesses in the first 3 years change who they serve. They add services. Like I started off as like a photographer, logo designer, website designer, all of the above, right? Eventually you hone in and so it's like your
Yeah,
copy changes, your photos change because your hair grows, your hair gets shorter, like your photos are going to change. Websites,
yeah,
on average, you're going to update your website every 3 to 5 years. So you can expect that
yeah,
that's going to be an expense. Colors is one thing where if you're not just having colors that, just like you said, like if you're thinking about more than just your ideal client, if you're also thinking about you and you are your brand, those don't need to change. Those can stay
yeah.
consistent for 10 years. And that's, I honestly
Oh,
can't
yeah,
think of
for
anything
sure.
else in a brand that stays consistent that long. So it is worth the investment, I think.
Yeah. Like you could, let's say, I don't know, there's just so many different things because your story can change or how you develop or your business journey might change. You can always tweak them a little bit just to make little differences, but overall they could stay fairly consistent. And that's amazing to me. Like yeah, it is really one of the things that, you could have for a very, very long time, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, I just want to know about like your work a little bit. So what has been your most rewarding project related to like brand color analysis?
I think coming up, so there's just so many different ways to look at it, right? Because I've had clients where they open up the file and they're just like, oh, I'm gonna cry. Like, these are mine. These are mine. I'm gonna cry. And of course, I read that email and I'm like, "Ah," And then their clients are like, I'm not sure. I need time to think about it. And then I'm like, oh man, okay, okay, okay. And then I go back and talk with them and we have this conversation of like, okay, why don't you think these fit? And there's a lot of feelings. It's very interesting. Like we talk a lot about how oh, I'm a business owner and I do think this way. And I was like, but there are a lot of feelings involved. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of like heart and a lot of sweat and tears that have gone in especially this last year for a lot of business owners, it's been really, really hard. And so like those clients that have, walked through or starting to walk through this journey with me, they're just like, is this really going to make the change? And I was like, I can't tell you if it's going to change your numbers, but I can tell you if you go with these and you show up, it will create a confidence in you that will help you be consistent to get your message out there. Because I think that's my favorite part. I think just educating and like being that cheerleader aspect in the brand colors. I mean, I love designing the colors, don't get me wrong, but just giving that little bit of nudge in an area where people feel lost is just like very rewarding to me because I don't know, I don't think there's been, for in my own personal journey with dealing with like brands or different people I've hired, it hasn't been just one thing. It's been several different people that have come along and just been that encouraging, being that cheerleader. And yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Just,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about some of your free resources that you have? Because I think that they are could be helpful for some people. And maybe even share about one of your services. I'm thinking one in particular that could be helpful for people.
Okay, so one, I have a free download right now that is the 3 ways to find inspiration for your brand outside of Pinterest because I love Pinterest, but I think sometimes we can rely on it way too much. So it just walks you through step by step ways to get inspiration for your brand and kind of like basically helps you learn to create your own mood board, which is one of my favorite things to do. I could do more mood boards like all day long, but that's not everybody's cup of tea. But I think it's a good place to start if you're like, kind of not feeling your brand really well and you want to, just figure out where it is visually, that's a great place to start. Two, I also have another free download on creative play. I think a lot of business owners they choose what they love to do as a business, and then we find that we're only doing that 10% of the time. So you're like, how do I keep going? I'm a creative. I'm sick of sitting at my computer. I don't know what to do with myself. You need to do some creative play and you have to incorporate that weekly, monthly, quarterly, or whatever into your business. And so that gives you like tips and tricks on how to do that. And there's some links in the back of that to help you get started. And then as far as a service that I think will help people in this area with their brand colors, I do have a brand color analysis. I sit down with you. It only takes 60 minutes of your time. You sit down with me, you do a call. I ask you tons of questions that some of my clients are like, oh, I didn't think that would be important, but they're very key to me in helping tell your story. And I come up with an 8 to 12 page document on your brand colors, how to use them, what's behind them, so that you can go implement that into your brand. So I do have other packages that are like backdrops and styling mats for your brand and things like that. But the brand color analysis, I think, is one of the most pivotal things that I do right now for younger brands or people who need more confidence behind what they're doing
Yeah, love it.
visually.
And I'm going to
So,
link everything below this video. So
oh,
thank you
thank you.
so much for, as well as all your like follower on Instagram and stuff. But thank you for so much for hopping on and chatting all about branding with me. This is just like kind of a high level, but it's all awesome and so
Oh, I'm so
glowing. So
glad.
I love
I could
chatting.
talk about it all day, literally all day.
I love it.
I could, yeah, I'm here
Awesome.
for it.
Well,
Yes.
thank you so much.
Thank you.